In a modest auto repair shop on the outskirts of town, life was about to take an extraordinary turn. Tom Matthews had always taken pride in his work, staying late into the evening to diagnose the most challenging mechanical problems. That fateful Friday night, as rain drummed against the worn metal roof, he found himself facing a mysterious electrical issue in a luxury Mercedes that even other mechanics couldn't solve. The car's owner, Reynolds, wasn't your typical wealthy client. There was something different in her eyes as she watched him work. When the engine finally purred to life, neither of them could have predicted what would happen next. Could a simple act of dedication transform two lives forever? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Catherine unfolded a well-worn world map across Tom's workbench, carefully smoothing its creased corners. Red lines traced ambitious routes across continents, each marked with detailed annotations in elegant handwriting. "I've spent the last year planning this," she said, her finger tracing a path from California to South America, "a journey around the world in my Mercedes. Not just the tourist routes, the real roads. The places where having a skilled mechanic isn't just a luxury, it's a necessity." Tom studied the map, noting the careful attention to detail in her planning. Each major city was circled, with distances and estimated travel times meticulously calculated. It was the kind of thoroughness he appreciated in his own work. Methodical, thoughtful, leaving nothing to chance. "And you want me to—" he began, already suspecting where this was heading. "To come with me," Catherine finished. "As my mechanic, my travel companion, my—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "My partner in this adventure. 6 months, all expenses paid, of course. The shop would be compensated for your absence." Tom's eyes moved from the map to his father's old shop clock ticking steadily on the wall. 6 months away from everything he'd known, everything he'd built. It seemed impossible, irresponsible even. Yet something about the idea tugged at a part of him he'd almost forgotten existed, the young mechanic who'd dreamed of more than just fixing cars in his hometown. "Why me?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Surely there are younger mechanics, ones with more experience with modern luxury cars." Catherine smiled, her eyes warm with understanding. "Because in 2 hours tonight, you showed me more genuine passion for your craft than I've seen in 20 years of dealing with dealership technicians. Because you talk to cars the way my father talked to watches, like they're living things with stories to tell. And because," she added softly, "I think you understand that some journeys aren't just about getting from one place to another." She pulled a leather portfolio from her briefcase, opening it to reveal detailed documents. "I've thought this through carefully. Insurance, visas, shipping arrangements for crossing oceans. Everything's been arranged. The car would be modified, with extra tools and spare parts. We document the journey, the repairs, the stories we find along the way." Tom's hands traced the route again, feeling the texture of the map beneath his fingers. The path wound through the American Southwest, down through Mexico and Central America, across to Europe, through the Middle East, and into Asia. It was more than a road trip. It was a testament to the kind of adventure he'd always told Jenny was important to dream about. "I have responsibilities," he said, though his tone lacked conviction. "The shop, my employees, all of which can be managed," Catherine replied. "I've run my own business for 20 years. I understand the complexities. What I'm offering isn't just a job, Tom. It's a chance to see the world through the lens of what you love most. Every culture has its own relationship with machines, its own stories of innovation and adaptation. Think of what we could learn, what we could share." Tom found himself looking at Jenny's graduation photo on his desk. His daughter had always pushed him to take chances, to remember that life didn't have to be a straight road from start to finish. He could almost hear her excitement if he told her about this opportunity. "I'll need time to think about it," he said finally. "This isn't A decision I can make standing here tonight. Catherine nodded, beginning to fold the map with careful precision. Of course, but don't take too long. Like any good mechanical system, timing is everything. She slipped a business card onto his desk. Call me when you're ready to talk details. And Tom, she paused at the door. Thank you for fixing my car tonight. Whatever you decide, you've reminded me that there are still people who take genuine pride in doing things right. As the sound of her Mercedes faded into the night, Tom stood, alone in his shop, the business card in his hand, feeling like a key to a door he never expected to find, let alone consider opening. Tom sat in his home office, staring at the email from Jenny that had arrived just minutes after their video call. Her words glowed on the screen, carrying the blend of wisdom and enthusiasm that always surprised him coming from his daughter. Dad, remember what you told me when I was scared to accept the Seattle job? Life's biggest regrets are usually the chances we don't take. Well, it's time to take your own advice. This isn't just about a road trip or being someone's mechanic. It's about saying yes to an adventure that comes once in a lifetime. Mom would have loved this kind of crazy idea. Do it for her. Do it for yourself. Besides, who else is going to send me pictures of cars from every continent? Love you, Jay. He leaned back in his chair, letting Jenny's words sink in. She was right. About her mother, Sarah had always been the adventurous one, planning summer road trips across the country, dreaming of places they'd visit someday. Before cancer rewrote their story 12 years ago, leaving those dreams permanently on hold, the practical considerations had occupied his mind for the past 3 days. The shop could run without him. Mike had been his lead mechanic for 15 years, more than capable of handling day-to-day operations. The financial arrangement Catherine proposed was more than fair, ensuring his employees wouldn't suffer during his absence. His house could be looked after by his sister who lived nearby, but it wasn't the logistics holding him back. It was the vertigo of stepping away from the familiar, of trusting that his carefully built world wouldn't collapse in his absence. The shop had been his anchor after Sarah's death, its daily rhythms and challenges keeping him grounded when grief threatened to sweep him away. He picked up Catherine's business card, turning it over in his hands. In the 3 days since her proposal, he'd learned about her through discreet inquiries. Catherine Reynolds wasn't just successful, she was known for her integrity, for building her investment firm on principles of sustainable growth and ethical practice. Her father's watch shop still operated in San Francisco, maintained as a working museum of horological craft rather than converted into another luxury boutique. The phone felt heavy in his hand as he dialed her number. She answered on the second ring, her voice carrying a note of pleased recognition. "Tom, I was hoping I'd hear from you." "I have conditions," he said, surprising himself with his directness. "3 of them. I'm listening." He could hear the smile in her voice. "First, we document everything, every repair, every modification to the car. Create a manual for others who might attempt something like this. Second, we visit technical schools along the way, share what we learn. Make this about more than just our journey." "Absolutely," Catherine agreed. "That's exactly the kind of purpose I was hoping to build into this." "And the third condition," Tom took a deep breath, "we visit Seattle first. I need to see Jenny before we leave the country. Make sure she knows her old man hasn't completely lost his mind." Catherine's laugh was warm, genuine. "I think we can manage. And that, I'd love to meet the daughter who helped raise such a thoughtful mechanic. Does this mean you're accepting?" Tom looked at Jenny's email again, at the framed photo of Sarah on his desk, at the worn edges of his father's old shop manual on the bookshelf. 3 generations of influences, all seeming to point him toward this decision. "Yes," he said, the word carrying the weight of every mile that lay ahead. "Yes, I'm accepting. God help me, but I'm actually looking forward to it." "Then we have planning to do," Catherine said. "Meet me for dinner tomorrow. There's a lot to discuss, and I have some ideas about modifications to the Mercedes I'd like your opinion on." After hanging up, Tom sat in the quiet of his office, letting the magnitude of his decisions settle around him. Jenny was right. Sarah would have loved this idea. He could almost hear her laugh, see her shaking her head at how long it had taken him to say yes to something that scared and excited him in equal measure. He opened his laptop and began a new document, World Journey Preparation Checklist. Some habits, after all, didn't need to change just because everything else was about to. The leather portfolio sat open on Tom's workbench, its contents spread out like a roadmap to their future. Passports with crisp new pages waiting for stamps, visas for countries he'd only seen on maps, international driving permits, and a meticulously organized itinerary. Catherine's thoroughness impressed him. She'd thought of everything from international health insurance to carnet de passage for temporary vehicle importation. "My father always said preparation is the foundation of excellence," Catherine remarked, watching as Tom reviewed the documents. "Though I suspect he was talking about watch repairs rather than global adventures." Tom nodded, understanding completely. The same principle had guided his work for decades. He glanced at the Mercedes, now up on the lift as they prepared it for the journey ahead. The past 2 weeks had transformed the elegant luxury car into something more purposeful, a long-distance traveler ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. They'd reinforced the suspension, added protective underbody plating, and installed a custom-built storage system for tools and spare parts. A secondary fuel tank provided extended range, while a sophisticated GPS and communication system would keep them connected even in remote areas. Every modification had been carefully planned, every system redundancy considered. Mike's taking the transition seriously, Tom said, watching his lead mechanic work with their newest apprentice. "He's already talking about implementing some new diagnostic procedures while I'm gone. The shop would be in good hands." Mike had been more excited about the opportunity than Tom had expected, seeing it as a chance to step up and prove himself. Catherine studied the checklist they'd been working from. "We're ahead of schedule on the vehicle preparations. How are you doing with the personal side of things?" Tom appreciated her direct approach. It had become clear over the past weeks that Catherine valued honest communication above social niceties. "Jenny's excited about our Seattle stop. She's arranged time off work to show us around." He paused, a slight smile crossing his face. "My sister thinks I'm having a midlife crisis, but she's agreed to watch the house, even promised to keep my garden alive." "And the emotional preparation?" Catherine asked gently. "It's not easy leaving everything familiar behind, even temporarily." Tom's hands found a familiar wrench, turning it absently as he considered her question. "You know what's strange? The closer we get to leaving, the more I realize I'm not really leaving things behind. I'm taking the important parts with me. Every tool I select, every procedure I plan for, carries my father's teachings. Every time I think about documenting our repairs, I hear Jenny's voice encouraging me to share knowledge." Catherine nodded, understanding in her eyes. "And Sarah? She's in every mile we're planning," Tom admitted quietly. "She always wanted to see the world. Now, in a way, she will." They turned their attention back to the practical tasks at hand. Tom had spent hours selecting tools, each one chosen for versatility and reliability. Modern diagnostic equipment, shared space with time-tested mechanical tools, a bridge between old wisdom and new technology. The shop's regular customers had been surprisingly supportive when told about Tom's upcoming absence. Many had shared their own travel stories, offered suggestions, even brought in maps and guidebooks from their own journeys. The adventure seemed to spark something in people, a reminder that life could still surprise you, even after decades of routine. "One last thing," Catherine said, pulling a small package from her briefcase. Inside was a leather-bound journal for documenting our journey, not just the repairs and modifications, but the stories, the experiences. Sometimes the most important maintenance records are the ones we keep of ourselves. Tom ran his hand over the journal's cover, appreciating its craftsmanship. In just over a week, they would begin their journey, heading first to Seattle before turning south toward adventures unknown. The preparations were nearly complete, every detail considered, every contingency planned for. Yet, as he looked at the blank pages of the journal, Tom realized that no amount of preparation could really ready them for what lay ahead. Some things had to be experienced to be understood. Like his father always said about diagnostic work, you can plan for everything, but be ready for anything. Dawn painted the sky in shades of amber as Tom raised his phone to capture the moment. In the photo, the Mercedes gleamed against the backdrop of Matthews Auto Service, its modified form a perfect blend of luxury and adventure readiness. Mike stood beside the shop sign, giving a thumbs up, while Catherine waited in the driver's seat, her smile visible through the windshield. The image would become their journey's first official documentation, a snapshot of the moment everything changed. You know the old saying, Mike said, checking the tool inventory one final time. A mechanic's car is never ready. There's always one more thing you could adjust. Tom nodded, pocketing his phone. That's why we have to leave now, or we never will. He understood the impulse to keep tinkering, to strive for an impossible perfection. But sometimes you had to trust your preparation and take the leap. The morning air carried the crisp promise of early autumn, and Tom's garden sparkled with dew. His sister Susan had arrived early, coffee in hand, to see them off. Mum and Dad would be proud, she said softly, giving him a fierce hug. This is exactly the kind of adventure they always talked about. Tom felt the weight of those words. Their parents had built this shop from nothing, teaching their children that hard work and integrity were the foundations of a life well lived. Now, decades later, their son was embarking on a journey that would test everything they'd instilled in him. Catherine stepped out of the car, giving them space for goodbyes. She'd grown comfortable with the shop's rhythms over the past weeks, becoming a familiar presence as they prepared for the journey. Now, dressed in comfortable traveling clothes rather than her usual business attire, she looked ready for the adventure ahead. "Final checklist?" she asked when Tom finally turned toward the car. He patted his chest pocket where he kept his father's old mechanical pencil. Tools secured, spares catalogued, emergency supplies stored, GPS program for our first stop. He smiled slightly. And yes, I remembered to pack actual clothes, not just shop rags. The interior of the Mercedes welcomed them with the subtle scent of leather and the quiet hum of sophisticated machinery. They'd modified the cockpit with additional gauges to monitor the car's enhanced systems, each one providing data that could prove crucial in remote areas. The back seat and trunk space had been transformed into an ingeniously organized mobile workshop, every tool and part secured for rough roads ahead. "Seattle first," Catherine confirmed, starting the engine. Its purr was familiar to Tom now. He'd spent weeks fine-tuning it for the demands they'd place on it. "Jenny said she'll meet us at that coffee shop she loves, the one with the view of Puget Sound." Tom settled into the passenger seat, feeling strangely comfortable despite the enormity of what they were undertaking. The rising sun caught the shop's windows, reflecting golden light across the parking lot. How many mornings had he arrived here, keys in hand, ready for another day of solving mechanical puzzles? Now each day would bring new puzzles, new challenges, new opportunities to prove his craft. "Ready?" Catherine asked, her hand hovering over the gear selector. Tom took one last look at the shop, at Mike and Susan waving goodbye, at the life he was temporarily leaving behind. The photo he'd taken minutes ago already felt like a milestone, the moment when thinking about an adventure became living one. "Ready?" he replied, surprised to find he meant it. As they pulled onto the street, Tom noticed Catherine was smiling. "What?" "Just thinking about what my father used to say about his watch repairs," she replied. "That the most satisfying projects are the ones that scare you a little at first, the ones that force you to grow." Tom understood perfectly. As the shop receded in the side mirror, he felt a familiar mix of excitement and uncertainty, the same feeling he'd had as a young mechanic tackling his first major repair. Some journeys changed you before they even began. The Mercedes purred steadily as they headed west, toward Seattle, toward Jenny, toward the first of many horizons. Tom opened the leather journal Catherine had given him, uncapped his father's pencil, and began to write, "Day 1. The adventure begins." Tom's journal entry captured the essence of their third day on the Pacific Coast Highway. There's something about working on a car beside the ocean that changes everything. Fixed a minor electrical gremlin in the navigation system today. A kind of repair I've done 100 times before, but doing it with the Pacific roaring in the background, sea spray mixing with the usual sense of electronics and diagnostic tools, made it feel like an entirely new experience. Catherine sat on a nearby rock, drinking tea and sharing stories about her father's watch shop while I worked. Starting to understand that this journey isn't just about the destinations or even the repairs. It's about seeing familiar things through new eyes. The Mercedes had developed the issue shortly after leaving Jenny in Seattle. A flickering navigation display might have seemed minor to some, but Tom knew small problems could cascade into larger ones if left unchecked. They'd found a perfect pull-off spot along the Oregon coast, a wide shoulder with a view that made the unscheduled stop feel more like a gift than an inconvenience. "You know," Catherine said, watching Tom carefully reassemble the dashboard, "most people would have just kept driving until we reached the next town." Tom smiled, his hands moving with practiced precision. "Most people don't understand that machines tell you when they need attention. Ignore the small voices, and pretty soon you're hearing big shouts, like my father with his watches." Catherine nodded. "He could detect problems just by listening to their tick. Said every watch had its own voice, its own story to tell." Repair complete, they stood together at the guardrail, watching waves crash against distant rocks. The Mercedes waited behind them, its polished surface reflecting the late afternoon sun. They'd covered hundreds of miles since leaving Seattle, but there was no sense of rushing, no urgent need to make up time for their brief delay, Jenny said. "Something interesting before we left," Tom remarked, pulling his jacket closer against the coastal wind. "She said this trip would change how I see my work. I didn't understand what she meant until now." Catherine turned toward him, curious. "And what do you see differently?" "That every repair is part of a larger story. Back home, I fix cars, and they disappear into their normal routines. Out here," he gestured at the dramatic coastline, "every repair is keeping our own story moving forward. It feels more purposeful, somehow." Tom opened his journal again, adding notes about the repair. Not just the technical details, but the context, the setting, the way the sea air had made his tools slightly slick with moisture. These were the kinds of details that might help future travelers, the small wisdoms earned through experience. They drove on as sunset approached, the coastal highway curving between ocean and forest. Catherine had suggested they take the Pacific Coast route all the way down to California before turning east. "The longer way," she'd said, "is sometimes the better way." That evening, parked at a small coastal inn, Tom made one final journal entry. "The Mercedes is running perfectly now, but that's not the most important discovery of the day. Found something else that needed maintenance, the part of myself that had forgotten how to see wonder in everyday moments. Some repairs aren't about fixing what's broken, but about preserving what's precious before it has a chance to break." He closed the journal, listening to the distant surf through his open window. In just a few days, they'd transition from this coastal paradise to the stark beauty of the desert. Each environment would bring its own challenges, its own stories. To add to their growing chronicle, Catherine's words from earlier echoed in his mind. Every journey leaves its mark on the traveler. Looking at his reflection in the window, Tom wondered what marks this journey would leave on him. What stories would fill the remaining blank pages of his journal? What discoveries waited around the next bend in the endless ribbon of highway ahead? The small glass vial of red-orange sand sat on the Mercedes dashboard, catching the harsh desert sunlight. Tom had collected it hours earlier, after their most challenging repair yet, a testament to both the severity of their situation and the triumph of experience over adversity. The fine grains still bore traces of motor oil from his hands, a reminder of how close they'd come to being stranded in the heart of the Mojave. The temperature gauge had been the first warning, climbing steadily, despite the modified cooling system they'd installed. Tom had recognized the signs immediately, the subtle changes in engine note, the slight loss of power. They'd managed to reach a small turnout just as the Mercedes warning systems lit up like a Christmas tree. "How bad?" Catherine had asked. "Already reaching for their water supply." "Bad enough to be interesting," Tom replied, popping the hood. The blast of heat that escaped told part of the story. The fine desert dust had overwhelmed their air filtration system, causing a cascade of cooling issues. It was the kind of problem that could destroy an engine if ignored, but they'd caught it in time. What followed was a masterclass in field repairs. Tom had spread a tarp beneath the car, creating a clean workspace in the desert sand. His tools, carefully selected for just such emergencies, were laid out with surgical precision. The modifications they'd made to the Mercedes proved their worth. Access. Panels that would have been buried in a stock vehicle were easily reached. Catherine proved an able assistant, anticipating his needs, asking intelligent questions as they worked. The sun beat down mercilessly, but they maintained their focus, their shared understanding of craftsmanship, creating an efficient rhythm. "My father would have loved this," Catherine said, handing Tom a specialized filter cleaning tool. "He always said true expertise shows itself most clearly in crisis." Tom nodded, carefully cleaning the clogged filter elements. "My dad taught me that every breakdown is an opportunity to learn something new. Right now, I'm learning that we need to rethink our filtration system for conditions like this." They worked steadily for 2 hours, the desert silence broken only by the occasional passing vehicle and their focused discussion of the repair. Each step was documented in Tom's journal, accompanied by quick sketches and notes about improving their dust protection systems. When they finally closed the hood, Tom's shirt was soaked with sweat, his hands bearing the honest dirt of serious mechanical work. The engine started smoothly, all warning lights extinguished. But instead of immediately continuing their journey, they took a moment to appreciate their surroundings. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, its harsh beauty magnified by the setting sun. The breakdown had forced them to stop in, a place they might otherwise have rushed through, to become part of the landscape rather than merely passing through it. That's when Tom had collected the sand sample, prompted by an old habit of documenting significant repairs. "Every repair tells a story," he explained to Catherine. "Sometimes you need a physical reminder of what you learned." Back on the road now, with the air conditioning working at full capacity, they discussed the implications of their desert challenge. The repair had proven the wisdom of their preparation, but also highlighted areas for improvement. Tom was already sketching ideas for enhanced filtration systems, thinking about other travelers who might face similar challenges. "You know what impressed me most?" Catherine said, glancing at the vial of sand. "How calm you stayed. Most people would have panicked, being stranded out here." Tom considered this. "Experience teaches you that panic never fixed anything. Besides," he smiled slightly, "this is exactly the kind of situation we prepared for. It's one thing to work on cars in a comfortable shop. It's another to prove you can handle whatever the road throws at you." The desert sun was setting behind them, painting the sky in impossible shades of purple and orange. Ahead lay more challenges, more opportunities to test their preparation and adaptability. The vial of sand would travel with them, a small monument to their first major trial, a reminder that the journey was teaching them both more than they'd expected. "We should add some weight to the backup water supply," Tom noted, already planning ahead. "And maybe consider a portable shade structure for repairs like this." Catherine nodded, understanding that each challenge made them better prepared for the next. The desert, she observed, has a way of teaching you what's really essential. The Mercedes purred steadily onward, its restored systems humming with renewed purpose, carrying them toward the Mexican border and whatever adventures waited beyond. The handwritten recipe book had started as a simple thank you gift from Miss Eleanor, the owner of a small Louisiana cafe where they'd stopped for breakfast. Now, 3 states later, it had grown into a collection of Southern hospitality, each a page telling the story of a different encounter along their journey east. "Now, sugar, you write this one down proper," Miss Eleanor had insisted, watching Tom repair her cafe's ancient refrigeration unit. "My mama's gumbo recipe ain't never been written outside the family, but anybody who can fix that old Kelvinator with such respect deserves to have it." Tom smiled at the memory as he added another recipe to the collection, this time from a retired Air Force mechanic in Georgia who'd insisted on helping him change the Mercedes oil. The man's wife had contributed her peach cobbler recipe while they worked, claiming it was payment for letting my Harold feel useful again. "You're turning into quite the curator," Catherine observed, watching Tom carefully transcribe the recipe. They were parked at a small garage just outside Savannah, where the heavy coastal air reminded them both of their Pacific Coast days, though the atmosphere here carried different stories. "It's not just about the recipes," Tom replied, closing the book carefully. "It's about the people, their stories. Every stop teaches us something new about how different communities keep their machines and their traditions running." Their journey through the South had been a revelation. The Mercedes, now wearing a fine coat of red Georgia clay dust, had attracted attention at every stop, but it was Tom's willingness to help with local repairs that had opened doors and hearts. In Mississippi, he'd helped a young woman get her grandmother's classic Cadillac running for a wedding. In Alabama, he'd spent an afternoon teaching basic maintenance to a church youth group, using the Mercedes as a high-tech demonstration platform. Each encounter added not just recipes to their collection, but stories of resilience, ingenuity, and the deep connections between people and their machines. "You know what fascinates me," Catherine said, as they prepared to leave the garage. "How every region has its own mechanical dialect, so to speak, like how that mechanic in Mobile knew exactly what you meant about the distributor timing just from the way you described the sound." Tom nodded, understanding perfectly. "It's like your father's watches. There's a universal language of machinery, but every community adds its own accent to it." He patted the Mercedes hood. "This car's collecting those accents, learning new dialects with every state we cross." The garage owner, a third-generation mechanic named Ray, emerged from his office with a folder of invoices. "Y'all be careful heading up the coast," he warned. "Hurricane season's coming on, and them barrier islands can get tricky." They'd planned for weather challenges, of course. The Mercedes carried satellite weather tracking equipment, and their route could be adjusted as needed. But local knowledge had proven invaluable throughout their journey, and they listened carefully as Ray shared his wisdom about coastal weather patterns. As they prepared to leave, Ray's wife appeared with a sealed container. "My grandmother's low country boil recipe," she explained, "and enough for your dinner tonight. Some things taste better when you're watching the sun set over the ocean." Tom added the recipe to their growing collection, noting not just the ingredients and instructions, but the story behind it, how it had sustained fishing crews during long nights at sea, how the spice blend had been adjusted through generations of family taste testers. Back on the road, Catherine steered them toward the coast, while Tom updated his technical journal. The Mercedes had performed flawlessly since their desert challenge, each maintenance stop more preventive than reactive. But it was the human maintenance, the connections made, the stories shared, the wisdom gathered, that filled most of his recent entries. "We're learning more than just regional recipes and repair techniques," he observed, adding a final note to the day's entry. We're learning how communities preserve their heritage through food and machinery, how they pass down their stories through flavors and engine sounds. Catherine smiled, understanding. Some journeys feed more than just the traveler's wanderlust, she said, as they curved toward the Atlantic coast. Sometimes they feed the soul as well. The recipe book rode beside them, no longer just a collection of ingredients and instructions, but a testament to the warmth and generosity they'd found in unexpected places, a reminder that every mile brought new opportunities to learn, to share, and to grow. The ship's manifest listed the Mercedes simply as private vehicle modified for international travel, but Tom studied the document with the same attention he'd give a complex wiring diagram. Seeing their journey reduced to official paperwork, vessel, registration, cargo declarations, insurance certificates, made the magnitude of their undertaking suddenly real in a different way. "Your car's not the first special vehicle we've transported," the cargo ship's chief engineer had said during their tour of the vessel. "But it's the first one where the owner's mechanic insisted on daily engine room visits as part of the booking contract." Catherine had arranged passage on a modern cargo ship, choosing it over faster options, specifically because it would allow them to travel with the Mercedes. The vehicle was now secured in a specialized hold, protected from salt spray and maritime weather, while they occupied two of the ship's few passenger cabins. "It's different than I expected," Catherine admitted, joining Tom at the rail as they watched the American coast disappear into the evening haze. "More industrial, less romantic than the ocean liners my parents used to talk about." Tom nodded, understanding. The working ship had its own kind of beauty. The efficient movement of crew members, the steady throb of massive engines, the precise choreography of maritime operations. It reminded him of a well-run garage, where every tool and person had its purpose and place. Their daily routine had quickly settled into a rhythm. Mornings were spent in the engine room, where Tom had found kindred spirits among the engineering crew. They spoke the universal language of machinery, trading stories, and techniques across cultural and linguistic barriers. "Watch this," the chief engineer would say, demonstrating how they balanced the massive propulsion systems. Tom recorded everything in his journal, noting how maritime maintenance principles might apply to automotive work. The scale was different, but the fundamentals of mechanical sympathy remained the same. Catherine spent her mornings on the bridge, learning about navigation and weather patterns from the officers. In the afternoons, they would meet to share what they'd learned, their conversations ranging from technical details to philosophical discussions about the nature of journeys. "It's like being suspended between worlds," she observed one evening, as they watched flying fish glide alongside the ship. "Not quite where we left, not yet where we're going, makes you look at everything differently." The manifest had become a sort of talisman for Tom, a tangible reminder of their progress. Each a page represented a different aspect of their crossing: fuel calculations, maintenance schedules, weather reports. He added his own notes in the margins, creating a documentary of their Atlantic passage. During one particularly rough night, when the ship pitched in heavy seas, Tom had made his way to check on the Mercedes. He found the vehicle secure in its cradle, but the sight of it, their faithful companion temporarily still and silent, had sparked an unexpected wave of anticipation for the European roads ahead. "She's dreaming of Alpine passes," Catherine had joked when he told her about his midnight inspection, but they both understood the sentiment behind the humor. The car had become more than just transportation. It was a partner in their adventure, its mechanical heart as much a part of their story as their own. The ship's crew had adopted them as unofficial members, sharing meals and stories in the common room. Tom learned that automotive expertise translated well to maritime problems. He helped diagnose a troublesome generator one afternoon, earning the respect of the engineering team and a stack of hand-drawn technical diagrams he added to his growing collection. "Next, Port Le Havre," the manifest noted clinically, but the words held worlds of promise. They spent their final evening at sea preparing for the next phase of their journey, reviewing maps and documents, ensuring everything was in order for their European adventure. Different roads, different challenges, Tom mused, making final notes in his journal. But the principles remain the same. Respect the machinery, learn the local wisdom, stay open to surprises. Catherine smiled, understanding. And sometimes, the longest distance between 2 points turns out to be exactly the right path to take. The manifest would travel with them, tucked among their growing collection of documents and memories, a reminder that every journey leaves its mark not just in official records, but in the quiet transformations of those who dare to undertake them. The collection of European road maps spread across their hotel room in Munich told the story of their journey thus far. Each crease and coffee stain marked a different adventure. Every handwritten note captured a lesson learned. Tom traced their route from Le Havre through France, Switzerland, and into Germany, each country adding its own character to their mechanical odyssey. "Look at this notation," he said to Catherine, pointing to a small mark near Stuttgart. "That's where we met Hans, the retired Mercedes engineer. His insights about the original design philosophy behind these engines changed how I think about the whole system." The maps had become more than navigation tools. They were a growing archive of experiences. Small workshops were marked with careful stars, each accompanied by notes about local mechanical wisdom gained. Scenic routes were highlighted in green, challenging roads in red, and particularly memorable stops circled in blue. Catherine leaned over the maps, smiling at a notation near the Swiss border. "The Alpine mechanic who insisted we upgrade our brake fluid for the mountain passes. Remember how he wouldn't let us leave until he'd taught you his special bleeding technique?" "Joseph?" Tom nodded, remembering the elderly mechanic's weathered hands, demonstrating the precise rhythm of the procedure. He'd been maintaining vehicles on those mountain roads for 50 years, said every road has its own voice and you have to learn to listen to it. Their Mercedes had proven itself on Europe's demanding roads, from smooth autobahns to narrow mountain passes. The modifications they'd made before leaving America had served them well, but they'd also learned to integrate European approaches to maintenance and repair. In France, a vintage car collector had shown Tom how to adjust the suspension for optimal handling on ancient cobblestone streets. In Switzerland, they'd spent 3 days with a precision mechanic who specialized in high-altitude vehicle optimization. Each encounter added new marks to their maps and new techniques to their repertoire. "We're creating our own kind of Michelin guide," Catherine observed, sorting through the collection. "Not for restaurants, but for mechanical wisdom." She paused at a map of southern Germany, where they'd detoured to visit a small technical school. Tom had spent a day teaching students about American repair techniques while learning European diagnostic approaches in return. The Mercedes itself had become a conversation starter in every country they visited. European mechanics were fascinated by their modifications, often suggesting refinements based on local driving conditions. Tom documented every suggestion, every critique, every bit of wisdom shared over cups of strong coffee in workshops across the continent. "It's interesting," he said, making a new notation on their current map, "how every region has its own approach to the same basic principles. Like that Italian mechanic in Turin who showed me how they handle electronic diagnostics differently than we do in the States." Catherine nodded, remembering the animated discussions that had transcended language barriers through the universal vocabulary of machinery. "It's like what you always say about there being many right ways to solve a problem." Their next destination was already marked on the newest map, a small village in the Austrian Alps, where a renowned mechanical workshop specialized in preparing vehicles for Eastern European roads. "We'll need their expertise," Tom explained, "before we tackle the challenges ahead." As they packed up the maps for the night, Tom carefully folded the most recent edition, a hand-drawn guide to back roads and reliable repair shops in Eastern Europe, given to them by a German truck driver. They'd helped with a breakdown outside Munich. You know what these maps really show? Catherine asked, watching Tom organize their growing collection. They show how mechanical expertise connects people across borders. Every mark on these maps represents someone who was willing to share their knowledge to help fellow travelers. Tom understood perfectly. In his journal that evening, he wrote, "Maps don't just show where you've been. They show how you've grown. Each mark represents a lesson learned, a friendship formed, a skill shared. The roads of Europe have taught us that every journey is also a journey of learning, and every mechanic's shop, no matter how small, holds wisdom worth discovering." The maps would continue to accumulate marks and memories as they pressed eastward, each new country adding its own chapter to their mechanical and personal odyssey. Tomorrow would bring new roads, new challenges, and new opportunities to learn from the collective wisdom of European craftsmen who, like Tom, had dedicated their lives to understanding the language of machines. The olive branch lay on the Mercedes dashboard, its silver-green leaves catching the warm Italian sunlight. The old farmer who had given it to them had called it un simbolo di pace, a symbol of peace. He had insisted on the gift after Tom spent an afternoon helping him repair the ancient Fiat tractor that had maintained his olive grove for 3 generations. In this part of the world, Catherine translated from the farmer's rapid Italian, they say an olive branch brings harmony to life's journey. She didn't add that it was also traditionally a symbol of love, though the knowing look in the old farmer's eyes as he glanced between them had said plenty. They were parked at a small overlook along the Amalfi coast, the Mercedes resting after the challenging switchbacks that had tested both car and drivers. The Mediterranean stretched endlessly below them, its deep blue waters merging with the horizon in a haze of afternoon light. The cars running differently here, Tom noted, making adjustments to the engine management system. The combination of salt air and mountain roads requires a delicate balance, but his usual focus on mechanical details seemed softened by their surroundings, by the way the sunlight painted everything in shades of gold and amber. Catherine watched him work, noting how his movements had become more relaxed since they'd entered the Mediterranean region. The intensity of Northern European efficiency had given way to a more measured pace, as if the rhythm of life here had seeped into their journey's DNA. "We're ahead of schedule," she said, consulting their itinerary. "We could stay an extra day, really absorb this place." The suggestion held more than just travel planning. It acknowledged the subtle shift in their relationship that had been developing since their Atlantic crossing. Tom closed the hood, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "You know, my father always said that some repairs can't be rushed, that sometimes you need to let things settle into their natural rhythm." He wasn't talking about the car, and they both knew it. They had developed an easy intimacy over the months of travel, born of shared experiences and challenges overcome together, the long conversations during ocean crossings, the quiet moments watching sunsets in different countries, the shared excitement of discovering new places and mechanical traditions. It had all led to this moment, this unspoken understanding. The next few days unfolded at a Mediterranean pace. They explored small coastal towns, where Tom found himself drawn into conversations with local mechanics who treated repair work with the same reverence they gave to food and wine. In a small shop in Greece, an elderly mechanic had shown him how to diagnose problems by touch and sound, explaining that machines, like people, spoke more truthfully when you took the time to really listen. "It's not just about fixing what's broken," the Greek mechanic had said through Catherine's translation. "It's about understanding the story each machine is trying to tell you." He had insisted they join his family for dinner, where the conversation flowed as freely as the local wine, and the distinction between professional colleagues and friends dissolved completely. The olive branch traveled with them, its presence a reminder of the different kind of wisdom they were gathering along these ancient shores. In her investment firm, Catherine had always measured progress in quarterly reports and profit margins. Now she found herself marking time by sunsets and shared discoveries. By the way, Tom's eyes crinkled when he smiled at her over morning coffee. One evening, as they sat at a small seaside restaurant near Thessaloniki, Catherine asked, "Do you ever think about what happens after this journey ends?" Tom was quiet for a moment, watching fishing boats return to the harbour. "I'm starting to realize," he said carefully, "that maybe the journey doesn't have to end. Maybe it just changes form." He reached across the table, taking her hand in his, oil-stained one, and the gesture felt as natural as any repair he'd ever made. The olive branch caught the last rays of sunset through the Mercedes windshield, its shadows dancing across the dashboard. They had come to the Mediterranean expecting to learn about different mechanical traditions, about how ancient cultures approach the maintenance of modern machines. Instead, they were learning about maintaining something far more complex and precious, the delicate machinery of two lives, discovering they might work better as one. The string of prayer flags fluttered from the Mercedes antenna, their faded colors dancing in the mountain breeze. A gift from the monks at a remote Tibetan monastery, where Tom had spent 3 days helping repair their only vehicle, a decades-old Land Rover that served as their lifeline to the outside world. The head monk had explained that the flags carried prayers for safe passage on the wind, their messages spreading blessings to all travelers they encountered. "The youngest monk asked me something interesting," Catherine said as they navigated. "A particularly challenging mountain pass. He wanted to know if fixing machines was a form of meditation for you. I wasn't sure how to translate your answer." Tom smiled, downshifting smoothly as they approached another hairpin turn. "Maybe because there isn't a simple translation." But he wasn't wrong. There's definitely a spiritual dimension to understanding machinery, especially out here. The Mercedes had proved its worth on roads that barely deserved the name, handling everything from muddy tracks to rocky mountain paths. They'd made several key modifications in preparation for this part of the journey, guided by the wisdom of local mechanics who understood these demanding conditions. In a small workshop in Nepal, they'd met an elderly mechanic who approached vehicle maintenance with the same reverence the monks gave their ancient texts. "Every machine has a soul," he told them, his weathered hands ghosting over the Mercedes engine. "Our job is not just to fix them, but to understand them, to honor their purpose." Tom had spent hours with him, learning techniques passed down through generations of mechanics who had kept vehicles running in some of the world's most challenging terrain. The experience had changed something in his approach, adding a layer of mindfulness to his already methodical work style. "It's like that Buddhist concept of mindfulness," he explained to Catherine as they paused at a mountain viewpoint. "Being fully present with whatever you're doing. When I'm working on an engine now, I'm not just thinking about the repair, I'm aware of everything, the sounds, the vibrations, the way different parts interact. It's a kind of meditation." The prayer flags snapped in the wind, their colors bright against the stark mountain landscape. They had added similar flags to their growing collection of artifacts, each set received from different monasteries and communities they'd helped along the way. Each carried its own prayers and stories, creating a tapestry of experiences that marked their journey through the East. One evening, camped beside a high mountain lake, Catherine watched Tom perform his now ritual evening check of the Mercedes. His movements had taken on a deliberate quality, each gesture precise and purposeful. The influence of their Eastern experiences was evident in the way he approached even routine maintenance. "You've changed," she observed, joining him by the car. "Not just in how you work, but in how you see things." Tom nodded, closing the hood. "With careful precision. These mountains, these people, they teach you that everything is connected. A mechanical problem isn't just about the parts that need fixing. It's about understanding the whole journey that led to this moment." They had learned to carry that sense of interconnectedness with them. In remote villages, where Tom's skills often meant the difference between isolation and mobility, They discovered that mechanical expertise transcended language barriers. The gratitude of a farmer whose tractor they'd repaired, the joy of a family whose ancient truck could once again carry their goods to market. These moments had become their own kind of prayer flags, spreading goodwill across the landscapes they traversed. The Mercedes itself had evolved, adapting to the spiritual nature of their eastern journey. Its engine note had become a familiar meditation bell, marking the hours and miles of their passage through these ancient lands. The prayer flags were just the visible symbol of a deeper transformation that had occurred in both vehicle and travelers. The monks were right about one thing, Catherine said, as they prepared to descend from the mountains toward their next destination. Every journey is both physical and spiritual. We're not just covering distance. We're discovering new ways of seeing. Tom understood. In his journal that evening, beneath technical notes about altitude adjustments and fuel mixtures, he wrote, "In these mountains, where prayer flags carry messages to the wind, we're learning that maintaining a vehicle is also about maintaining awareness of the road, of each other, of the countless connections that bring purpose to our journey." The Aboriginal painting rested carefully wrapped between their luggage, its intricate dots and circles, telling the story of their most challenging mechanical rescue yet. The artist, an elder named Uncle Jimmy, had created it after Tom spent 2 grueling days repairing the community's vital supply truck in the heart of the outback, working through scorching heat and dust storms that tested both man and machine. These circles, Uncle Jimmy had explained, pointing to the artwork center, represent the places where people gather to share knowledge, like you did with our young men, teaching them about engines while you worked. The connecting lines, he said, showed the paths that linked different communities together, paths that relied on vehicles staying operational in one of Earth's harshest environments. They hadn't planned on spending so much time in the remote community, but when word spread that an experienced mechanic was passing through, other mechanical problems had emerged for Tom's attention. The Mercedes itself had needed significant maintenance after their crossing through the outback's brutal conditions. "It's humbling," Tom said to Catherine, as they watched the sun set over the vast red landscape. "Everything we've learned on this journey, all the specialized tools we carry, and out here, success still comes down to basic mechanical principles and the ability to improvise." The community's mechanical workshop had become a gathering place during their stay. Young men from the community had watched intently as Tom diagnosed problems and demonstrated repair techniques, while elderly members shared their own wisdom about keeping vehicles running in the unforgiving environment. "Your car," one of the elders observed, running his hand along the Mercedes' dust-covered flank. "It sings a different song now. The desert has taught it new words." Tom understood what he meant. The vehicle had adapted to the demanding conditions, finding its rhythm in the harsh landscape. Catherine had spent the time learning about the community's connection to the land, discovering parallels between their traditional knowledge and the mechanical wisdom Tom had accumulated over his career. "They read the landscape the way you read engines," she told him. "Every detail has meaning, every pattern tells a story." The major repair came unexpectedly when the community's supply truck suffered a catastrophic transmission failure. With the next scheduled service vehicle weeks away, the situation was critical. The truck was their lifeline, carrying essential supplies and connecting them to distant medical services. Tom approached the challenge with the combined wisdom of his journey, the precision learned in European workshops, the mindfulness gained in eastern mountains, and the resourcefulness demanded by the outback itself. The young men of the community became his apprentices, learning not just repair techniques, but the deeper principles of mechanical sympathy. "You don't just fix the part that's broken," he explained to his impromptu students, voices mixing with the sound of tools against metal. "You listen to what the whole vehicle is telling you. Out here, everything is connected. One weakness can affect the entire system. Working through the heat of the day and into the star-filled nights, they gradually brought the truck back to life. Each step was a lesson, each challenge an opportunity to share knowledge that could prove vital in future emergencies. The community supported their efforts with traditional knowledge about surviving in the harsh environment, teaching Tom and Catherine about reading weather patterns and finding water sources. When the truck's engine finally roared back to life, the celebration involved the entire community. That's when Uncle Jimmy had presented them with the painting, explaining that it represented more than just the repair. It told the story of knowledge shared, of communities connected, of traditions maintained through modern means, the old ways. And the new ways, he said, they're like the two sides of an engine working together. One's no good without the other. As they prepared to leave, their Mercedes now carrying the dust and wisdom of the outback, the community gathered for a traditional blessing of their journey. The painting would travel with them, its story now part of their own ongoing narrative of mechanical and personal discovery. We came to Australia thinking we'd learn about handling harsh conditions, Catherine reflected as they drove toward the coast. Instead, we learned about the true meaning of community resilience. Tom nodded, watching the vast landscape roll past. In his journal that evening, beneath detailed notes about their outback modifications, he added, "Some repairs strengthen more than just machines. They strengthen the bonds between people, between traditions, between past and future. The outback teaches you that survival depends not just on technical knowledge, but on the wisdom of connection." The black pearl gleamed in Catherine's palm, its surface shifting with iridescent colors that reminded Tom of oil patterns on water. A gift from a Tahitian pearl farmer whose boat engine they'd repaired, it represented their last major stop before the final push toward home. The farmer had called it a pearl of transformation, claiming it captured the essence of their journey across the Pacific. He said pearls grow more beautiful through adversity, Catherine recalled, carefully wrapping the pearl in soft cloth, like travelers growing wiser through challenges. The metaphor wasn't lost on either of them as they prepared the Mercedes for its final ocean crossing. Their Pacific journey had been different from their Atlantic passage, island hopping rather than a straight crossing. The Mercedes traveling between ports on smaller vessels, each stop adding new stories to their collection. The car had become something of a legend among island mechanics, who marveled at its modifications and the tales of distances covered. "Your vehicle has traveled far," an elderly Samoan mechanic had observed, his weathered hands tracing the car's curves. "It carries the dust of many lands in its soul." He wasn't wrong. Despite their best cleaning efforts, traces of red outback dust still appeared in the car's crevices, mixing now with the salt air of the Pacific. Tom had found the island mechanics to be masters of improvisation, teaching him techniques born of necessity in places where spare parts were precious and creativity was essential. In Fiji, he'd learned how to repair electronic components using methods he'd never encountered in his formal training. "It's like jazz," he explained to Catherine after a particularly innovative repair session. "You learn the rules so thoroughly that you know exactly how to bend them when needed." The Mercedes maintenance log had grown thick with notes about alternative repair methods, each island contributing its own variations on mechanical themes. Their schedule had allowed for longer stops than planned, and they found themselves embracing the island concept of time. In Tonga, they'd spent 3 days helping a community prepare their fishing boats for the upcoming season. The work was different from car repair, but the principles remained the same: understanding systems, solving problems, keeping vital machinery running. "We're not the same people who left that morning from the shop," Catherine mused one evening as they watched the sun set over a lagoon. The observation carried weight. Their relationship had deepened beyond either's expectations, transformed by shared experiences and challenges overcome together. Tom nodded, his hands automatically checking the Mercedes' fluid levels, a habit now as natural as breathing. "The journey changes both the traveler and their vehicle," he replied. "Every mile teaches something new, if you're willing to learn." The car itself bore witness to their evolution. Its original elegant lines remained, but it had acquired character marks from their journey, small scratches that told stories of mountain passes, subtle dents that recalled desert challenges, modifications that spoke of lessons learned in distant workshops. Their final island stop brought them to a small atoll where the local mechanic was also the island's traditional navigator. He spent an evening teaching Tom about wayfinding, drawing parallels between reading ocean currents and diagnosing engine problems. "Navigation isn't just about knowing where you are," the man explained. "It's about understanding all the forces that brought you there." He studied the Mercedes with knowing eyes. "Your vehicle understands this. It carries the memory of every road in its metal." As they prepared for the final leg of their Pacific crossing, Tom and Catherine found themselves increasingly talking about the future. The journey had changed them in ways neither had expected, creating something deeper than just a shared adventure. "Whatever happens next," Catherine said, watching dock workers secure the Mercedes for its last sea voyage, "we've learned that home isn't just a place. It's a journey you choose to make together." Tom's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. The pearl rested in its wrapping, a small but potent reminder of how far they'd come. In his journal that evening he wrote, "Some journeys measure distance in miles, others in moments of transformation. The Pacific taught us that the most important mechanics isn't about fixing machines, it's about maintaining the connections that give life its meaning." The horizon ahead promised home, but they had learned that endings often concealed new beginnings. Like the pearl in its cloth, their future held depths of possibility that shifted and gleamed with promise. The brass compass gleamed in its wooden case, a surprise gift from Catherine as they began their final approach toward home. Not a modern GPS unit, but an antique mariner's compass, restored by the same craftsman who had maintained her father's. "Watches," the inscription read, "Not all who wander are lost, but all who journey are transformed." It belonged to a ship's engineer, she explained as Tom held it reverently. "Someone who understood that finding your way home is as much about the heart as it is about direction." The needle swung true north, but they both knew it pointed towards something more significant than mere magnetic poles. The Mercedes had carried them thousands of miles across continents and oceans, and now, as they drove along the familiar Pacific Coast Highway, Tom could feel how differently the engine ran. Not worse or better, but changed, like a musical instrument that had found its true voice through years of playing. "She sounds like she's singing," Catherine observed, her hand resting lightly on the dashboard. "Remember how she sounded when we first left? All precise and proper, like a concert pianist playing scales. Now she's more like a jazz musician who found her groove." Tom smiled at the comparison, remembering all the modifications and adjustments they'd made along the way. Each repair, each improvement had added its own note to the symphony of mechanical excellence the Mercedes had become. The engine's purr now carried echoes of desert winds, mountain passes and ocean crossings. "Mike's been sending updates about the shop," Tom said, checking their position against the compass more from sentiment than necessity. "Says business has actually improved. Seems our journey's been good advertising. People like knowing their mechanic has world-class experience." They'd maintained contact with many of the mechanics they'd met along their route. Email exchanges about technical challenges had evolved into friendships, creating a global network of craftsmen sharing wisdom across borders. Tom's repair manual had grown into something more like an encyclopedia of international mechanical knowledge. "I've been thinking," Catherine began, then paused, choosing her words carefully. "The investment firm doesn't really need me in the office every day. Most of my work can be done remotely, from anywhere with an internet connection, even, say, from a well-equipped auto repair shop." The implication hung in the air between them, as warm and promising as the afternoon sunlight. Tom thought about his shop, about how his perspective on it had changed during their journey. What had once felt like the boundaries of his world now seemed more like a foundation from which new adventures could begin. The shop could use an investment expert, he replied, his voice carefully neutral but his eyes twinkling. Someone who understands both financial and mechanical appreciation. Besides, we still have so many stories to document, so many techniques to share. The compass rested between them, its needle steady despite the car's movement. Like the pearl, the prayer flags, the Aboriginal painting, and all their other artifacts, it had become more than just an object. It was a symbol of their journey's deeper meaning. They stopped at a scenic overlook, the same one where they'd paused on their first day of travel. The Mercedes ticked quietly as it cooled, the sound familiar yet different, like an old friend who had grown wiser with time. Tom ran his hand along its flank, feeling the subtle scars and changes that marked their shared adventures. "You know what I've learned," Catherine said, joining him beside the car, "that sometimes the longest way home turns out to be the truest path. That sometimes you have to circle the world to find what's been waiting right in front of you." Tom picked up the compass, watching its needle align with the invisible forces that guided it. "My father used to say that the best mechanics understand that every repair is really about restoration, bringing something back to its true purpose." He turned to Catherine, his expression soft with understanding. "Sometimes that applies to people too." The sun was setting behind them as they continued their journey, casting long shadows ahead. The compass rode on the dashboard beside the pearl, the prayer flags fluttered from the antenna, and all their other treasures rested safely in the trunk. Each artifact carried a piece of their story, but the greatest transformation they carried couldn't be held in hands or captured in photographs. The Mercedes hummed beneath them, its engine note now a symphony of experience, carrying them toward a home that would be both familiar and entirely new. The compass needle pointed north, but their hearts had already found their true direction. The shop keys felt heavier in Tom's pocket as they approached familiar territory, their worn edges carrying the weight of memory and promise. He'd carried them across 6 continents, through countless adventures and challenges, a constant reminder of where he'd come from and where he might be heading. "Look," Catherine said softly, pointing to a sign they'd just passed. 20 miles to home." The word home carried new meaning now, shaped by months of shared experiences and growing certainty about their future together. The Mercedes seemed to sense the proximity of its starting point, its engine note carrying a particular resonance that Tom had never heard before. Like an orchestra building to its finale, every mechanical component played its part in a symphony of harmonious operation. "Remember how worried we were about the suspension modifications?" "Holding up?" Tom mused, his hand resting lightly on the gear shift. "Now look at her. She's handled everything from desert sands to mountain passes, and she's running better than ever." Catherine nodded, her hand unconsciously touching the compass on the dashboard. "Like someone else I know," she said with a smile. "More confident, more capable, yet somehow more humble too." The keys shifted in Tom's pocket as they rounded a familiar bend. He'd added several keys during their journey, ones from workshops where they'd spent significant time, others from places that had become meaningful to them. Each one represented a door opened, a lesson learned, a connection made. Mike's kept. "Everything running smoothly," Tom said, checking his latest message. "But he says there's a special project waiting for us, a vintage Mercedes that no one else could diagnose. Word of our journey has spread." The idea excited him in a way he wouldn't have expected 6 months ago. Before, such a challenge might have felt like pressure. Now it felt like an opportunity to apply everything they'd learned, to share their accumulated wisdom. "I've been thinking about the shop's future," Catherine said, her business acumen blending with their shared vision. "There's real potential for an international diagnostic center, a place where mechanics from around the world could come to share knowledge and learn from each other." The keys clinked together as they hit a small bump, and Tom smiled at the sound. Like that workshop in Switzerland, where mechanics and engineers collaborated on solving complex problems. Exactly, but with your practical experience and connections from this journey, plus my business background, she let the thought hang in the air, full of possibility. The familiar landscapes were sliding past now, but they looked different somehow. The same trees, the same hills, but seen through eyes that had witnessed the wider world. Even the quality of the light seemed changed, or perhaps it was just their perception of it. Tom pulled the keys from his pocket, letting them rest in his palm. The shop key was still instantly identifiable among its international companions, its brass worn smooth from years of daily use, but now it represented not just his past, but a future full of unexpected potential. "You know what I learned from all those mechanics we met?" he said, merging onto the highway that would take them the final stretch. That the best workshops aren't just about fixing cars, they're about building connections, sharing wisdom, keeping dreams running smoothly. Catherine reached over, her hand covering his around the keys. "And the best journeys don't end when you reach your destination," she added. "They just change direction." The Mercedes maintained its perfect harmony as they drove, every piston, stroke, every valve movement telling the story of their journey. The modifications they'd made, the challenges they'd overcome, the wisdom they'd gathered. It was all there, in the mechanical poetry of motion. The keys warmed in their joined hands, no longer just tools for opening doors, but symbols of possibilities waiting to be unlocked. The shop lay just ahead, but it wasn't an ending they were approaching. It was a beginning, a new chapter in a story that had grown far bigger than either of them had imagined. "Almost there," Catherine said, as familiar buildings began to appear. Tom nodded, feeling the weight of the keys, the weight of the future they represented. "Almost home," he corrected gently. "And this time, home means something entirely new." The Mercedes hummed its agreement as they made the final turn, carrying them toward a destination that was both an ending and a beginning, just as the keys in their hands were both a connection to the past and a key to their future. The small velvet box rested in Catherine's jacket pocket, containing a ring unlike any other. She'd commissioned it during their last stop in Switzerland, working with a craftsman who specialized in both jewelry and watch mechanisms. The band was crafted from repurposed parts of a vintage Mercedes timepiece, with a setting that incorporated small gears visible beneath the diamond's facets. It was, like their journey, a perfect blend of mechanical precision and emotional resonance. The shop's familiar sign came into view as they made the final turn. Mike stood in the doorway, surrounded by the entire staff, a welcome home banner stretched across the bay doors. The Mercedes, carrying the dust and memories of 6 continents, purred to a perfect stop in exactly the same spot where their journey had begun. "Home at last," Tom said softly, his hand lingering on the key in the ignition. The engine's note held steady for a moment longer, then fell silent, as if offering its own conclusion to their shared odyssey. Mike approached as they stepped out, his face split by a broad grin. "You know," he said, embracing Tom, "when you left to fix one wealthy woman's car, we didn't expect you to spend 6 months fixing cars across the entire world." The staff crowded around the Mercedes, examining its travel-worn exterior with professional interest. The modifications they'd made, the battle scars they'd earned. Each mark told a story that these skilled mechanics could read like a book. "Is that an Australian Outback brush guard?" one of the younger mechanics asked, pointing to their custom modification. "And those are Himalayan air filters, aren't they?" Tom nodded, feeling a surge of pride, not just in the vehicle, but in the knowledge they'd gathered. "Wait until you see the maintenance log. We've got techniques from every continent, solutions you wouldn't believe." Catherine watched the reunion from a few steps back, her hand touching the box in her pocket. The shop had changed in subtle ways. During their absence, new equipment, an expanded customer waiting area, signs of Mike's capable leadership. But the essence remained the same, a place where mechanical problems met human ingenuity. "Your father would be proud," Tom's sister Susan said, appearing beside him, "not just of the journey, but of what you've brought back with you." Her knowing glance between Tom and Catherine suggested she understood that the greatest discoveries hadn't been mechanical. As the initial excitement settled, Catherine cleared her throat. "Actually," she said, "there's something else we need to share." Her hand slipped into her pocket, fingers wrapping around the velvet box. But before she could continue, Tom stepped forward. "Mike," he said, "remember that vintage Mercedes you mentioned? The one no one could diagnose?" Mike nodded, gesturing to a car beneath a cover in the corner. "I've been waiting for your expertise, though I have to say the business has grown while you were gone. Word of your international adventure brought in customers from 3 states away." Catherine's hand released the box, recognizing that this return to the work they both loved, was an essential part of their story. She watched as Tom approached the mysterious vehicle, his movements carrying the confidence of someone who had faced and solved mechanical challenges across the globe. The staff gathered around as Tom pulled back the cover, revealing a Mercedes. From the same era as Catherine's original car, the symmetry wasn't lost on anyone. As Tom began his initial inspection, his movements were different than they had been 6 months ago, more fluid, more intuitive, incorporating everything he'd learned from mechanics around the world. "See this?" he said to the gathered staff, pointing out a particular component. "In Tunisia, I learned a diagnostic technique for this exact system. And here," he indicated another area, "there's a solution I learned from a master mechanic. In Tokyo." Catherine felt the weight of the ring box in her pocket, knowing its moment would come. But right now, watching Tom share his knowledge with his eager colleagues, she understood that their journey hadn't really ended. It had just transformed, like everything else in their story. The late afternoon sun slanted through the shop windows, catching the prayer flag still fluttering from the Mercedes antenna, illuminating the collected artifacts of their journey displayed proudly on Tom's office walls. They had returned changed, carrying not just memories and mechanical wisdom, but a shared vision of the future that was about to unfold in ways neither had imagined. The wedding photo held pride of place in the shop's newly renovated reception area. Tom and Catherine standing beside the Mercedes that had brought them together, its well-traveled surface gleaming in the sunset light. Prayer flags fluttered from the antenna, and their collection of artifacts from around the world decorated the ceremony space. Jenny had served as maid of honor, Mike as best man, and the guest list had included mechanics from 6 continents, many attending virtually through a live stream set up by the younger staff members. 1 year after their return, Matthews International, automotive had become exactly what they'd envisioned. The original shop had expanded, adding a training center where mechanics from around the world came to share knowledge and learn from each other. The vintage Mercedes that had awaited their return now served as a teaching tool, its restoration an ongoing project that incorporated techniques from every corner of the globe. Catherine managed the business side from a new office overlooking the workshop floor, her investment expertise helping other mechanics establish their own shops based on their collaborative model. Her father's watch shop in San Francisco had become a sister location, creating a unique blend of mechanical disciplines that attracted craftsmen of all kinds. The Mercedes itself had earned a special place in the shop's layout. Between international teaching assignments, it served as a rolling testament to the possibilities of mechanical excellence and human determination. Its maintenance log had been digitized and shared with workshops worldwide, becoming a resource for mechanics facing similar challenges in remote locations. Tom still worked on cars every day, but now he split his time between repairs and teaching. His students ranged from experienced mechanics seeking to expand their skills to young apprentices just beginning their journeys. Each class began with him sharing an artifact from their journey, using it to illustrate not just mechanical principles, but the human connections that made their work meaningful. Jenny had followed her own path of innovation, developing new diagnostic systems that incorporated the global wisdom they'd gathered. She was a frequent visitor to the shop, adding her expertise in modern automotive technology to the blend of traditional and contemporary knowledge they'd created. The photo captured more than just a wedding day. It documented the moment when one journey transformed into another. The ring Catherine wore, with its intricate mechanical details, sparkled in the image, a perfect symbol of how their two worlds had merged into something greater than either had imagined. In quiet moments, Tom and Catherine still talked about their round-the-world adventure, but now their stories focused less on the distances covered and more on the wisdom gained. They had learned that the greatest journeys aren't measured in miles, but in moments of growth, that the most important repairs aren't made to machines, but to the connections between people, and that sometimes the longest path between 2 points turns out to be the one that leads exactly where you need to go. The Mercedes waited in its place of honor, ready for whatever adventure might come next, its engine still carrying the harmonies of 6 continents in its steady purr. Some journeys, after all, never really end. They just open the door to new possibilities, new paths, new stories waiting to be told.